How you doing?
What's up, man? How you doing today?
I'm doing all right. How about you?
Hey, good. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you also.
Where are you located?
I am in Northwest Arkansas.
Okay, excellent. Excellent. Well, hey, before we get into your life and your career, I want to know, how did you survive the last 3 years with COVID? How did you get through that time period? And has it changed anything with the way that you conduct business and do things now?
Um, I'm not a good person to be at home. I like to get up and go and do.
Yeah.
And and thankfully uh, we live in a what would be considered a more conservative state, and we live within 20 minutes of the headquarters of Walmart.
Yeah.
Uh, in this kind of northwest corner, we've got the headquarters of Walmart. We've got the university. We've got JB Hunt Trucking. We've got Tyson Foods. Everything is right here in this corner, which were all industries that kept going and kind of demanded that. And so the rest of the state followed. And so while we sent people home from our work, we also had people who came into the office, and I was one of those.
Yeah.
So I continued to do that. That helped me because I need to have that schedule. I like that.
Yeah.
Um, it I tried to be as normal as possible.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I was reading some notes right here. There was a man named Rollo May who was an old psychiatrist, and he had a quote one time that said, "The opposite of courage is not cowardice; it is conformity."
Yeah.
And not saying that conforming sometimes is not wrong, but I just tried to continue to live my life the way I'd always lived it. And thankfully, we lived in an area that allowed that. There were a lot of things that closed down, but it was not like a lot of places in this country. And so, therefore, we had a population boom. I mean, people came from all over the place to come here because of that. Here, Texas, places like that, Oklahoma. Um, did it change me? It changed me from the standpoint of, I think maybe I have my eyes open, watching to see what's next on the horizon. Is there something else coming? Will there be another one? Things like that.
Yeah.
Um, I think as far as work goes, you see a lot more. The offices are not full anymore. They're not full because they can't be full. They're not full because I think it proved to people they could work from home and that they feel comfortable doing that. There's a lot of people that like that. Um, and so you'll see a lot of people that will be in the office 2, 3 days a week and at home 2 days a week, things like that. Which makes it harder for me because if I want to go see the people who work for me, I go when their office is empty. Oh, they're at home today.
Yeah.
So it did change the way that work happens for sure.
Yeah. So let's get into exactly what you do for a living. I'm going to hypothetically put you in front of a bunch of grade school kids, third
Okay.
graders, career day. One of the kids looks up at you and says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you
I
answer
work.
them?
I tell them that I work with computers. I've worked with computers most of my life, and I work with a lot of people that work with computers. And I've got a grandson that's 6 years old, and he's a techie kid and everything. But what I tell him is, they're learning. My grandson is learning to code, and
Wow.
so I tell them, um, I am a guy that works with computers. I tell computers how to work, and we have people that are all over the world working on computers for our company. And so I try to keep it as simple as possible if I were doing that. But what I do is I lead a global organization that works for a poultry company, and we supply breeder stock to all of the poultry companies around the world. There are only two companies in the world that do that,
Wow.
us and one other. And so those poultry companies, Tyson, Pilgrim's, uh, Foster Farms, Purdue, they all have to get their beginning birds from somewhere, and that's from either us or our competitor.
Wow,
And
that's
so
fascinating.
that's what we do.
Interesting. So when you were in the third grade, what was your dream? What did you want to be when you grew up?
You know, I don't know that I remember third grade, but my dream was I loved tearing electronics apart and just digging in and seeing what they did.
Yeah.
Back then, a phone on the wall, you remember the phones on the wall? I loved, unscrewing the earpiece and the mouthpiece and looking
Yeah.
inside and seeing what that did. And that was my plan. And after high school, I went to DeVry Institute of Technology, worked on electronics, and decided I'm going to go in the Air Force and I'm going to get some real training and I'm going to come out and be an electronics guy. And I'm colorblind. And the Air Force said, you're not working on electronics in here as colorblind. You got to be able to see the colors of wires. You got to be able to do all of this. And I got it by in school because professors would say, I'd say, hey, is that brown? No, that's black. Things like that. And
Yeah.
I would get by. I'd learned to get by. That forced a change. And the Air Force was what made that change. I had kind of me, and I was already married. We kind of invested that we were going to go in the Air Force, and I went to the recruiter that day, and he said, "Well, hey, there's these new jobs. And one's called a computer operator, one's called a computer programmer. I'm not quite sure what they do, but you got to take a test." And I said, "I'll take the test." I took the test and passed it. And he said, "Which one do you want to do?" And I said, "I have no clue. I don't know what they are." He said, "Well, I think the operator uses their hands more." And so I went that way, and that got me into computers. But I just loved electronics and just working. My dad was a printer, an old type of printer, and I always helped him. And I probably at that time I thought I'll be a printer.
Yeah.
I'm one of the guys that I'm okay with the trades. I think they're extremely valuable, and I don't think that every kid has to go to college. I think there's work out there for them to do if they want to do it, and we need that work.
Yeah, I agree. So who's been kind of a motivator or a hero for you in your life?
Um, I've had many mentors throughout my career. And I have one that I still keep in touch with today, and he and I will talk almost daily. And when we finish our phone call, we will say, he or I will say it, let's go make a difference today. And that came later in my life, but I've always been fortunate enough to have certain people placed in my life throughout my journey that have given me inspiration or given me what I needed at that time to hear. Um, my uncle is who gave me the idea for the book that I wrote, and he's a very positive man, but he would always, at those times when I would see him, he would interject something into my life, and it would be just what I needed to hear at the right time. So I've had multiple people, um, but I've also had seen a lot of people that I don't want to be like, and that gave me the contrast that I used to create the book of here's what we need to do to be set apart. Here's what we don't need to do to be set apart. And it's very simple in today's world. I told a story earlier this morning to a man. I said, this weekend, my wife and I went to a small restaurant here. It was a Sunday morning, actually Sunday afternoon. The church crowd was coming there. It was crowded. Here comes a young couple up. They've got a baby in a carrier. And we were standing outside and we said, hey, come over here and stay in the shade with your baby. We'll step out. And he said, oh, no, that's fine. We've got a shade. We'll pull over. But then he said this, and I haven't heard this in years. But, sir, thank you so much for your kindness. We don't say that stuff anymore.
Yeah.
We don't do those little things anymore. And so what I tell students who come here for internships, we have a lot of internships from colleges who have poultry science departments because they want to be either at our company or our competitor. And I get to speak to them each year, and I tell them, I'm going to give you some very specific, simple little things that you can do that will set you apart from the rest of the group that you come in with when you come to this company or you go to another company. And it's simple things as courtesy, respect, humble. It's just little things that probably you and I grew up with and saw it a lot more, but our world has become this world that is so fast moving. We're on our devices constantly. We expect things at the speed of Google. We want them just like that. and our attention spans have dropped, and we're just moving and we want this. And I think it's created almost an anger in the population at times. And instead of just relaxing and thinking about the small things that we need to do. So back to your original question, the one that's in my mind right now is my mentor that hired me at this company. He's since retired, but he and I still talk, and we're very much on the same wavelength as far as living life based on relationships and helping people be better. I think it was Zig Ziglar that said you can have anything in life you want if you'll help other people get what they need. And that's kind of how I live my life. You know, I've got a group of people who work for me around the world, and my job is to help them get what they need each day to do their jobs. But in the end, how can we be better tomorrow than I started today? Can I do that somehow? And that's my goal.
So, what is the ultimate motivator for you? Every day you wake up and you do your work, you get through your day. What is it that motivates you?
Hmm. I think that probably first and foremost would be my family. Um, I have a wife and two children who are both married with grandchildren, and I want to be a good example. You know, I want my grandkids to see my wife's Lolly, I'm Pops, Lollipop.
Hmm.
Um, but I want them to see their pops as a guy that they can remember and model their lives like. I'd like my kids to be able to do that too. Um, and so everything I do, I have a choice. Uh, we all have choices, and those choices all have consequences. And um, I try to think about everything I do while I'm not good at it. I try to think about every choice I make and everything I do, knowing that there will be a consequence. And so my motivator is to be the absolute best person that I can be. Um, and that may not affect anybody today, or it may affect only one person, or it may affect 10. I don't know. But my motivator is to be that person that when I walk away, they'll remember me as something that was positive in their life. Um, so that's what I do.
So, if you can meet anybody alive on the planet right now, who's a
Hmm.
fascinating person you would like to meet and talk to for a little bit?
Um, gosh, I would love to meet, and this may seem strange, but there's an author. He lives in Alabama, and his name's Andy Andrews. And I read his first book called The Noticer that I read changed my life. And I would love to meet him and just sit down and talk with him, and just because everything he writes seems to just hit me perfectly. And so I would like to meet him. There's lots of people. And I think it's probably people that I've read about. Um, you know, I'm not big into uh, kind of superficial things. I feel like a lot of times there's a lot of people that live just on the surface of life, and when I say that, I mean uh, they are moved by what they maybe hear on the news about an actor or a, a singer or something like that. And while those people may have purpose in life, I'm just not big into that because they're people just like me. And I look at politicians that way also. You know, yes, they have a huge stage a lot of times, but in the end, we all came into this world naked and we'll go out. And um, I just don't put a whole lot of stock into that. And so I want to talk to somebody who's going to take me to a deeper place and spend some time with them and be able to walk away from that conversation and say, wow, that person not necessarily has knowledge, but they have wisdom. And that wisdom has come through experience and things like that. Uh, so Andy would be one of those guys. I love the book Man's Search for Meaning. I would love to speak there. things like that. But right now, Andy Andrews would be the first one that would come to mind.
So in this life that we lead, we learn things, we overcome things, we accomplish things, but we gain wisdom in that process. If
Right.
you were to have a dream tonight, you ran into the 20-year-old version of yourself. You could give that younger version of you a piece of advice. What would you tell that young version?
I would tell that young person that you don't have all of the answers, and because I thought I did. Um, I'll give you an example of that one. Me and my dad were one time. I drove a delivery van while I was going to school at night, and I lived in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And my wife and I got married. She was working at a mall. We were both going to school at night. My mom and dad came over to visit one time, and I asked my dad if he wanted to ride my route with me one morning. He said, sure. And so we're in there talking, and he was talking about somebody we knew who had had something happen to them in life. And I made the comment, they need to just get over that and move on. Very callous, nonchalant, get over it and move on. It was just a few years later, short years, that my 27-year-old sister had a new baby, but she passed away during childbirth. And all of a sudden, I was put in a situation of where if I was outside of my body looking at me, I was saying to those people, you need to just get over it and move on. And all of a sudden, I realized that's way, way harder. And so it took a hard lesson to teach me that stuff. And I have gotten to where I'm at today because of lessons that I've learned. But yes, I've told my son because I see a lot of me in him, and he's 29 years old. No, he just turned 30. That's right. Um, we don't have all of the answers. And I saw the saying that if you could give young leaders one thing, what would you tell them? And that would be, it's not about you. It's about the people around you. It's about the people who work for you. I think I'd tell myself those two things. I think it changed my life.
Yeah. So of all of the business that you've done in your life, all of the clients and people that you've affected, what's been the best success story?
That I can think of a few things, and it seems like they always come when there's um, some bad things going on. But I'll just use a current example. When I wrote my book, and it's just a small book, and I tell people I'm not a Pulitzer Prize winner. Um, I know that, yet I think that the content of the book is sound, and I think it's solid. Um, but what I found is that people would write me texts. Um, they would send me emails, and they would say, when I read this in your book, it really spoke to me, and I would think, that's strange. I didn't write the book for that, and yet they had got that out of it. But there was one lady in the UK who wrote me a book, and she went into this long thing about how she'd been abused as a child, and went through the whole story in a text, long text, and told me that she had read my book and that it had given her strength to make it through that day. And when I first decided I wanted to write a book, it was not to be famous. It was not to sell books. It was not to do anything. It was simply I had stuff in my head I needed to get out. And I found a lady who had been a Zig Ziglar employee who lived in McKinney, Texas. And I drove down one day and I spent a morning with her. And she has a publishing group. And she said, Kendall, I think you've got a story to tell. So I will ask you this. If you could touch one person from your story, would you write the book? And I said, I would. And I wrote it, and I've been able to touch a person. And that was my goal. And so, gosh, how can there be anything bigger than I one of these days will leave this earth, and that person will be different because of me. And I didn't even mean to do that. It's just some words I wrote down that had happened in my life. And so I've come to that conclusion that when we have things happen in our lives, when we gain that wisdom, we almost have a responsibility to share that with other people so that they can hear how you navigated those waters and they can do the same thing. Maybe they may do it differently, but you gave them some encouragements, something like that.
Yeah. What was the book in your life, as a writer? What was the book when you were young that you read that really either made you want to write at some point or read more?
Yeah, I was not a big reader when I was growing up. I didn't seem to have the attention span that I needed to read to do that. Of course, I was a big a Bible studier. I was a uh, there were other books that I read. I think it was more when I got older. Um, while I can't thinking about my time in the Air Force, and then we were in Tucson, Arizona for 4 years after that. Um, I can't even remember some of the first books that I read, but even simply, I coached Pee Wee baseball, and there was a man who wrote a book, and I don't even know his name, but he talked about the Pee Wee coach, and what he talked about is in Pee Wee baseball, you may have a young man that's this tall and a young man that's this tall and this tall, and man, he can throw and he can bat and he can do all of this stuff, but when they get older, that boy may never play baseball again, and it's the young one that may actually play. And that made such an impact on my life because what it's telling you is that at that age, it doesn't really matter. There's it's not important about the playing the game. What's important is about how do you lead them and how do you impact their lives and give them the opportunities equally across all of the players. And so I remember that book. I was very young when I read that. I don't even remember the name of it, and I should, but I
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah.
But probably things like that.
Yeah. 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 So let's get to the essence of exactly who you are. Everyone
Okay.
has a perception of you. You got family, friends, clients, colleagues, but you're in control. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I would, I would hope, and I would hope that I would see myself, and I do, as a very hard worker, as a kind person, as a person who treats everyone the same equally, um, as a person who doesn't put importance on position or power, but will treat the president of a company to the janitor. And we always hear that, but I try to do that. Um, try to be extremely humble. Um, and all of these things came because, well, maybe not all of them, but most of them came because I was taught a lesson that made me see that. My mentor says, if we don't live in humbleness, we'll be humbled. That's for sure. And that is extremely important to me to be a humble individual. I'm not saying I'm powerless. Humble doesn't mean you're weak. It means that you understand your failings and you understand that you're a human like everyone else. But also believe that I have some strengths that I can use to give people certain things. I think I would see that in myself. I hope I would. I think I've received enough feedback from my employees and from my family and from those people around me that that's what they see. Now, I will be the last one to see that. Um, I'll be the last one to recognize where I am. One time, I report to the president of our company, and my wife said something to me a few years back. She said, Kendall, you're one of the executives at your company. And I said, I just don't see myself as that. I don't even think about that. And yet I am that. I understand I am. And with that comes some power. And it's just power within the ranks of the people that are here. They look at me differently, but I don't look at myself that way. I think I'm always slow to the party. I'm slow to give myself the credit I need to give myself. Um, and to give myself the benefit of the doubt at times, probably harder on myself than most people are. Don't know that that's bad, but I think I probably am. So I would hope that people would see me that way, and I think that I am learning to see myself that way.
So, Kendall, if anyone wants to get your book, learn more about you, anything regarding your world, where can they go?
I can go to Amazon, Books A Million, Walmart.com, all of those places. The Gooder Life in layman's terms.
Excellent. Kendall, this has been great, man. Thank you for opening up. Thanks for your story. Best of luck with everything.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care.